Modern Warfare 3 has already had some transformative updates in regards to movement and core mechanics, but it seems like we're only just getting started. Yesterday, Greg Reisdorf and Adam Iscove of Sledgehammer joined streamer Repullze on his podcast to have a chat about Modern Warfare 3 in the future from what we can expect to see. A refreshing sort of one-on-one approach to communicating post-launch, if I can say so personally, but anyways, it proved to be rather insightful. Today, we're running down some of the changes and insight that you can expect to see in the near future, so as we go along, drop your thoughts down below on what you're looking forward to or hoping to see out of it. If you enjoyed the video, you find it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. Subscribe if you're new. Check out my friends over at G Fuel, where code Espresso can get you 30% off your entire order. And if you want to come hang out with us while we stream, chat one-on-one, that link's in the description below as well. But anyways, let's get into it. So let's start with some quality of life stuff here at this. Firstly, one of the things that was missing out of the last two updates in a larger capacity was that of any weapon tuning that really made any substantial changes or major differences. We're still awaiting that next major balancing pass here for weaponry, but while we don't have any exact ETA, it is mentioned as coming soon. So that could be something that still happens in preseason, or again, it could be something that happens in season 1 now that we're like 2 to 3 weeks away from that likely, depending on when it ends up launching. Again, it is listed as early December, so that could be week 1 or week 2 of December. But they did state that they want to give SMGs a bit of a buff here, because right now, ARs are absolutely the dominant meta, which, I mean, I'm okay with. ARs are usually my main, but of course that doesn't speak for everybody as a player experience, but the submachine gun category does seem to be lacking a bit in that terms of power, so that should be getting adjusted as one of the key focal points here for that. What everything else has behind it, they did not mention any specifics, but anyways, beyond that, we also learned of a visible stamina bar coming here at this. So for those of you guys that don't know exactly how stamina acts here with this, just simply try and tack sprint down the long street on favela or something. You'll end up seeing that your soldier gets progressively more and more tired per se, where you don't have the ability to go back into tack sprint as quickly as you did before. That's something that's depleting that stamina bar. And on the back end, there is already a stamina bar that the game uses to register when you can jump back in attack stance and stuff, but now they're going to be adding a visible bar for you, the player, to have immediate access to know how much of that is already used. We also learned they're working on custom binding for diving and sliding being worked on here, so that you can end up binding it to a different button if you want to use both, but not have to use overlapping actions with one singular button like we had in last year. That's something that I'm very curious to see how that will work out, because unlike mouse and keys, you have a much more limited set of buttons available to you on a controller. Like if you look at it, and this is including stuff that you wouldn't otherwise be able to use buttons for, the total buttons you have are 4 D-pad, 2 buttons for start and options, the center pad to bring up your scoreboard and statistics in-game, your home button, your main buttons of X, square, triangle, and circle, A, X, Y, and B if you end up playing on Xbox controllers, your thumbsticks, and your L1, L2, R1, R2 triggers. So unless you have a custom mapped controller or something like one of the scuffs that end up having more buttons, you're at a finite number of how many different binds you have available. So very curious to see what this will entail, how you'll be able to custom bind it here, and if it has any further hurdles afterwards once introduced. But that's something they are working on. They also stated that bunny hopping is set to return in some capacity, where you can kind of do it now, but it's more so a dead bunny hop, whereas bunny hopping as recently as the Modern Warfare 2 beta, you could end up using that chain-based movement where you'd get a little bit of momentum out of that on a horizontal level instead of just simply dead bunny hopping, where you almost, not quite, just stop in place when you do that. So that'll be something here that will probably frustrate a lot of people, but also be welcome news for others. So I guess it just depends on where you fall on that. Spawns are also being examined, with fixes being targeted for it, though they did mention that it can be a little tougher to knock down some of these, because you have things like, they gave the example of hardpoint. Hardpoint has a select number of spawns for each different hill and hardpoint location. So on that rotation, you have a set number of spawns always moving and always in motion based upon where the objective is in the game. So some things are harder than others to end up nailing down, and especially with the pace of different maps that we've seen back in the day, they're not going to exactly act one-to-one as they did in 2009. But I'm absolutely welcoming the idea of spawn adjustments here in the future, because, well, honestly, I think one of the worst things in-game right now is the spawn system. You play domination on high rise, you look one way and they're spawning behind you. You look that way, they're spawning behind you again. They've flipped 2 times in 10 seconds. Not to mention, if you play hardcore like I have been for camo grinding, it just makes it so much worse, because one shot and you're dead. But anyways, beyond that, spawns are going to be examined here, hopefully having fixes in the near future. Snaking was something that was mentioned here, which is very interesting to me. So for those of you guys that don't know what snaking is, you haven't seen it in action, if you watch the CDL or Call of Duty League, you would see it immediately. It's something where you, I don't know if abuse is the right word, but you take advantage of the mechanic where you can tack sprint out of going into a crouch so that you end up going crouch up, but incredibly fast to the point where it's almost impossible to hit the player hitbox who is doing that snaking mechanic. On the opposing player's screen, it's just a head bobbing up and down, but on the player snaking, they get a lot more information by seeing everything and being unhittable behind a certain level of barrier. I think that's a good thing to adjust. I think that it does get a little cheesy. And honestly, I think just having a cooldown for rapid pop-ups is a great way to do it. I don't know if it's that easy in practice, but that'd be my first guess. Aim assist was something that was talked about where they said it's at an okay place right now, but are always taking a closer look at it, where they said specifically talking about options on aim assist, but they come with a downside. Maybe remove options for aim assist so there's only one to tune. So that said, when you take a look at it, you have 4 different default options for aim assist, but tuning aim assist means you have to tune 4 different variations here of that. So they're trying to figure out the best solution as they put it. So that's something to consider. And then they also mentioned they have a list of updates for the firing range that they want to add, but they have no guarantees for when or if those will come throughout the year. But I'm always welcome and open to that idea as well. Give us like a recoil plot, something that gives us the ability to practice those recoil patterns, give us damage values that pop up per every hit you end up landing on a dummy, and so on and so forth. That gives more information, because of course you can see those detailed statistics, which is definitely nice, but how much of that actually applies then with the multiplier for headshots, for chest damage? Those exact values aren't known in that moment. And finally, they mentioned the experimental playlist is in place to test out ideas, even if they don't make it to live, which is pretty cool. And they also mentioned specifically that health regen differences may be something tested out in the near future. But then they finally gave us insight into existing features here, such as, well, the prestige system, where for Season 1 and into Modern Warfare 3, it is unfortunately going to be the seasonal prestige system once again, which was interesting because they seemed very disappointed in the ability to bring back a standard prestige mode, and with reports of this system's initial creator class being pick 10 and then being shot down by upper brass at Infinity Ward, that kind of makes me actually believe that they really were gunning for a traditional prestige system once again here within Modern Warfare 3, what very well could have been. And they also mentioned explicitly they were working on weapon prestiges, but couldn't get that in time either. So maybe in the future, but I'm not really counting on it. And then the final thing for me as a grinder, which is kind of a bummer, is right now they said they have no Ultra Mastery camo plans. They stated the idea was thrown out there, but it did create a lot of problems in general, as they said. And now I get the immediate response of, well, how? It's just a camo. How does that create problems? But from the limited knowledge that I have on game dev, having talked with the designers and devs actually in the trenches, working on this kind of stuff, a lot of the issues and complications come down to UI and how things link on the back end. And not necessarily it's just a matter of, hey, let's design another camo. It's not that easy per se. The way that I think of it is that every action, of course, has to be connected, right? Like, think of red string from an action to a challenge completion as you'd see on like a cork board or something like that. Those detective investigation boards, stuff like that. But when you start to do that, you have those red threads that link one to one, but you're going to see some tangle when you start introducing a lot more of them, especially when you introduce 900 existing pieces of string on a singular board. Having to introduce another element of, let's say, communication in regards to tracking across game modes then at that point to match up to give credit for something else, well, that would be something that would then, of course, create more clutter, more entanglement, and stuff that just does not make it necessarily easy to go from that point across the board to another. You'd end up seeing, again, some sort of tangle and miscommunication on the back end at that point. So that's the way that I see it, and in that regard, I do understand it, but I am hoping that in the future, we can end up seeing some sort of mastery camo, because with so much invested into the camo system, I just think that now would be the perfect time to do that, you know? You have so much across 2 different games for potential mastery camo grinds that it'd be really cool to see that introduced as a way to reward players that go all out for it. Now, the one thing that noticeably was absent in regards to this discussion with Sledgehammer was skill-based matchmaking. This was not something that was touched on, despite it being a topic that everyone would love to hear about, the same with every single year. Truthfully, I don't think that we're ever going to see this discussed, but even if we would, That's a discussion for Activision and Demonware, the matchmaking team behind that. The studio themselves at Sledgehammer just makes the game. They don't deal with any matchmaking algorithms or anything like that. But again, I don't see this topic ever really being mentioned. Even in person, when we try to talk about this at events, it was always brushed off as, oh, I'm not the one with that information, or something similar in that regard, where it's just kind of like that stereotypical tech support loop of, let me redirect you until you're in the exact same spot with no answers and you've just wasted a ton of time. And to be fair, I suppose when we have those kind of meetings in the past with developers, it's usually design guys, artists, QA. It's not the top brass, those people that make those decisions, that could give us a straightforward answer as to why it can or cannot be adjusted. So for the millionth time on my level, because for some reason, anytime this topic pops up, I have to talk about it, even though my position hasn't changed in the last 5 years since it was introduced. I think the level and degree of the current matchmaking parameters is absolutely overkill. I think that it's fine to balance teams out and such, but when you're sacrificing ping and connection to matchmake lobbies, or when I see the same 5 names multiple times a day, when I can know exactly when I'll have a good or bad lobby based on my last 5 to 10 matches, that's the issue. I don't mind playing players of my own caliber, but I do mind sacrificing the genuine nature of the game because an algorithm deems it so. Anyways, that's not the topic for today's video. Don't want to go off on a tangent. That's a different story for a different day. But final notes here for this, before we wrap everything up, is that, as I mentioned, it's incredibly refreshing, I think, to have these sit-down chats with developers. I don't know how long this level of communication will keep up. I hope it lasts, and I do think it's a great way to have a one-on-one chat with the community. Raven did this for a few weeks back in Caldera during Vanguard's year of support for Warzone, and it was great and very insightful. So to see this now from the jump is an incredibly promising start. So fingers crossed we do have this sort of level of communication keep up, even if it's only once or twice a season. I'd take that over just no communication and instead just seeing tweets about new bundles and everything. If you can even stay semi-engaged with the community, I think that people will be incredibly happy for that. So anyways, that's where we're at. That's what Sledgehammer sat down and chatted about with the community here as of yesterday in what I think, again, was a very insightful podcast episode. But anyways, that's where we're going to wrap it up. So let me know your thoughts down below. Before we wrap everything up, once again, make sure you check out my friends over at G Fuel. Code Espresso gets you 30% off your entire order to fuel your COD grind this season, whether it be weapon levels, weapon camos, Warzone upcoming, and all things that come along with that. I can't recommend it enough. The Morbius Nectarine flavors, hype sauce, strawberry banana, pink trip, my team Carnage, our flavor of Pog Juice. Highly recommend all those. Love them. But again, link in the description below. Code Espresso can get you 30% off your entire order. For now, though, that is what we're going to call it. So drop your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing. We're getting all things Modern Warfare 3 and so much still upcoming. I'd love to have you. But for now, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.